Hello, I'm Rob Rebein, Interim Dean of the IU School of Liberal Arts, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this morning's presentation of the IU Bicentennial Medal to Dr. Jon Eller, Chancellor's Professor of English and Founding Director of the Center for Ray Bradbury Studies. I'll be serving as the MC of today's event, and I'm honored that we could join together in this unique way to celebrate Jon and his many contributions to Indiana University and the IU School of Liberal Arts. I'm especially honored because when I arrived at IUPUI more than 20 years ago in the fall of 1998, I was lucky enough to have Jon Eller assigned as my mentor, and I have counted him as a friend ever since. Jon Eller served in the United States Air Force for 20 years and taught English at both the U.S. Air Force Academy and the United States Naval Academy before retiring from service in 1993, at which point he came to IUPUI to join the faculty of the Department of English and the editorial staff of what would later become the Institute for American Thought. During his time at the Air Force Academy, a science fiction conference invited celebrated author Ray Bradbury to speak. Eller and Bradbury began a friendship and a working relationship that continued until the author's death in 2012. As the relationship deepened, Eller began writing and publishing about Bradbury and Bradbury's works, and in 2007, he co-founded the Center for Ray Bradbury Studies, a research center that produced a scholarly journal and scholarly editions of Bradbury's work. After spending much of his career researching and writing about Bradbury, Jon is now the world's foremost expert on the author. And as any of you who have attended one of Jon's public lectures knows, the problem he faces every time he speaks about Bradbury is not what to say, but rather how far back into the story to start and where to stop, because truly, Jon's knowledge of Bradbury and his work is encyclopedic. When Ray Bradbury passed in 2012, his family and friends showed their appreciation to Jon by donating much of the contents of the author's Los Angeles home and office, including his library, his drafts and other personal files, and even his awards and memorabilia to Jon and the Center for Ray Bradbury Studies. As a result, the center is now one of the largest single author archives in the United States, with collections valued at over $7.8 million. Now, allow me to introduce Richard Turner, Emeritus Professor and former Chair of English. Richard, you are the lone speaker we have from the Department of English, and I know Jon has so many fans in that department. Would you please speak to us a little bit about the tremendous impact Jon made, not only in the School of Liberal Arts, but in the department?
Yes, I'd be delighted. In 1993, we were in desperate straits, and we needed a textual editor for the first edition project. And we were lucky enough to get a major retiring from the Air Force, and as you said, who'd been teaching at the Naval Academy. Now, as someone who grew up listening to Navy retirement ads, celebrating the prospect of retiring after only 20 years of service, I hope I'll be forgiven for assuming somewhere in my brain that this retired major would somehow or other be taking it easy in this new assignment. But as you know, Jon's contribution from the very start have been wonderful. He helped to get the first project back on its usual pace. And what I saw more clearly was Jon's extraordinary readiness to become a full member of this academic community. Despite the full workload that he had as his primary assignment, Jon volunteered to serve on regular and ad hoc communities in the department, and he taught courses for us when we were shorthanded. And not just helping out, but in but also making important contributions to those committees and providing rich and engaging courses for his students. Now, those of you who have worked with Jon know what comes next. Those ad hoc, voluntary, on an as-needed basis soon became central and significant parts of English department productivity. There were much-needed graduate courses in textual and critical scholarship, and numerous directed writing and directed reading courses for both graduate and undergraduate students. Jon's experience, perspective, and keen judgment were a superb resource for the department's planning and review policies and processes. Again, all of this with a full workload in another unit. We felt really special to benefit so much from Jon's extraordinary experience and generosity of spirit. But as the folks in American Studies and the Institute of American Thought will tell you, we were not special. Or rather, we were not the only ones who were special. Jon was sharing his unbounded curiosity and extensive interests and becoming a central force and a supportive leader with other intellectual projects on campus. Now, it's not uncommon in an academic community to find people who have broad interest and the ability and passion to pursue those interests with deep and disciplined habits of inquiry. Jon Eller is one of the few who has all those attributes, all that passion, all the commitment to do whatever a question or interest demands. But among people who know an awful lot about many areas and have the chops to move successfully in multiple disciplines, Jon is rare in his readiness to apply that energy, knowledge, habits of inquiry to make someone else's life better and richer. Soon after meeting Jon, one realizes just how much he knows about so many things. But discovering that usually happens because Jon is sharing with you something that you need or you are interested in. Jon does not seem to regard all that store of knowledge and experience as his, but as something he's been gathering in order to enhance some project or contribute to someone else's need for knowledge. For Jon, his knowledge is a gift to a person or a project. His interest, his passions, his expertise, his extraordinary sense of community are all gifts he has shared with us continually, all of us, colleagues, students, friends, family, are better for Jon's joining our community and adding a really special presence to our personal and professional lives. Thank you, Jon.
Sharing those memories of Jon, and I can certainly attest to his mentorship of me when I was preparing the final draft of my first book. He had to become not only the textual editor for the Purse Edition project, but my own personal textual editor. Thanks so much, Jon. Now let me introduce Philip Goff, Executive Director of the Center for the Study of Religion and American Culture and Professor of American Studies. Phil, would you please share a few words with us about our honored guest?
Thanks, Rob. It's really my honor to participate in this moment, the 11th hour, the 11th day, the 11th month, to honor our veteran colleague who's done so much for Indiana University. You know, I recall when I first arrived at IUPUI being pulled into the office of Tony Sherrill, someone Jon and I knew and loved a great deal. Tony gave me a primer on who to turn to, who to trust in the School of Liberal Arts and on campus, and Jon Eller was at the top of the list. I'd not even met him yet, but I knew of his character. I believe the first time Jon and I worked closely together was on an ad hoc sort of underground committee of scholarly editors who saw that the schools and campuses' P&T guidelines needed to change in order to better categorize our work. What we did wasn't applied research, nor was it merely service. We worked together to change our colleagues' minds to accept scholarly editing as a different kind of basic research. And in doing so, we opened the path for other forms of scholarship and creative activities to be recognized in SLA and on campus. Since then, we've worked on countless committees, most recently the Chancellor's Professor Selection Committees, and on the centers and institutes meetings where Again, I over and over witnessed the incredible due diligence Jon always brings to the task. But perhaps because Jon was in the service, and because service is where I most got to know him, I guess it's his service to the university that most stands out to me. I was Associate Dean for Research as he worked tirelessly behind the scenes to smooth the path for Ray Bradbury's materials to come to IUPUI. And I've told Jon about this. I recall when an old friend who was the most senior curator at the Huntington Library, which is right next to Caltech and with JPL, he asked me, how the hell did Bradbury's materials end up in Indiana? And I told him we have this secret weapon named Jon Eller. Most don't know how much work, physical as well as mental and emotional, goes into building a center. The balance of interests, handling of personalities, worrying about money. How many lunches, Jon, did we strategize over at chancellors or in our offices over the years? I've tried to think of how to summarize Jon's work. Over the past year, it so happens I've been rereading the Stoic philosophers. And one came to mind this weekend, Marcus Aurelius, who was a soldier, a philosopher, and a leader, an emperor. In the first chapter of his Meditations, he describes those who most influenced him. His list of 10 things about Claudius Maximus, his teacher, I think best fit Jon. Self-control and resistance to distractions. Optimism in adversity. A personality in balance, dignity and grace together. Doing your job without whining. Other people's certainty that what he said was what he thought and what he did was without malice. Never taken aback or apprehensive, neither rash nor hesitant or bewildered or at a loss. Not obsequious, but not aggressive or paranoid either. Generosity, charity, and honesty. The sense he gave of staying on the path rather than being kept on it, that's my favorite. That no one could ever have felt patronized by him or in a position to patronize him. Finally, a sense of humor. Jon, you're a man of faith and great principle. Indiana University is more than a university or an institution. It is people working together to do great things. It's altogether fitting that you receive this Bicentennial Medal. Congratulations, and thank you for your friendship and mentorship over the decades, just as Tony Sherrill predicted.
Thank you so much, Phil. Now, let me introduce Marianne Wokeck, Emerita Chancellor's Professor of History and past Director of the Institute for American Thought. Marianne, would you please share a few words with us about Jon and his contributions to liberal arts?
Sorry, it took me a little while to find the unmute.
You're good.
Colleagues and friends, it is both pleasure and privilege to tell you about Jon from my perspective. As a fellow English major, a long time ago, faculty member, and by now retired, and editor, reflecting on my working with Jon, I was struck by the many things we do not have in common, and then, more importantly, those convictions and values we share and that have made our collaborations effective and satisfying, at times even fun, for which I am very grateful. Jon is what I came to label in my time as Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, not very respectfully, especially on this day, a military brat. Very different from my background as a post-World War II German, whose pacifist leanings were reinforced after moving to Philadelphia, when I worked with the papers of William Penn, governor and proprietor of Pennsylvania, and a leading Quaker with a commitment to peace, not war. Jon grew up as an only son. I'm the eldest of three with a very pronounced older sister syndrome. Jon is a collector, foremost of popular music of an earlier time and books without limits of period or topic. And he has an amazing ability to recall and add to details of his various collections. My traditional education introduced me to the canon of classic world and American literatures, but I'm hard-pressed to remember, even in basic outline, plots, characters, and styles. Jon, by comparison, is able to give a cohesive summary and comment on its significance, too. I've always been most envious of Jon's ability to write. I do not know whether it comes easy, but the outcome is always impressive and expressed in the word count, a quantitative measure that obscures the quality. While Jon loves, knows, and has written about American literature of the 20th century, especially Ray Bradbury, my interest as a historian is mostly focused on the 18th century, worlds apart, but known to Jon through his coin collection. Those differences aside, we became collaborators, first as colleagues and later as friends, because of three fundamentally similar ways of thinking and acting, variously based on principle, experience, and on good fortune. Jon and I share respect for organizational structure, often expressed and experienced in the form of hierarchies, which was critical in creating an institute, a center, and programs within the framework of the university, campus, and school. Closely related to that willingness to learn and work within the system, we have developed and accept a sense of responsibility toward work and those with whom we interact as colleagues, and most importantly, as teachers. Jon is an educator in the best way that I can imagine, namely unconditionally and holistically. His commitment and care manifest mundanely in observing deadlines to support colleagues in advancing their careers, as well as time for and attention to students in their quest for successfully completing degrees. Jon's exceedingly well-developed sense of duty, from which colleagues, collaborators, and candidates of all kinds have benefited over the years, has at times come at a price, most often in the form of stress. Were it not for the partnership with and support of his wife, Jon would be a different man, and his impact as scholar, teacher, author, and director would not have reached the extraordinary level that the Bicentennial Medal celebrates. For those of us who have been fortunate in the choices of our spouses, no award of academic or other honors can truly and fully reflect the contribution of the other part of the couple. In closing, I thank Jon for all the work that he has undertaken and accomplished, and I congratulate him for this particular honor, and I hope that he does not think that it is a diminishing of his recognition to draw attention to Debbie's otherwise unacknowledged part in a distinguished and distinct contribution to Indiana University. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Now, let me introduce David Pfeifer, Emeritus Senior Lecturer in Philosophy and past Director of the Institute of American Thought, as well as past President of Principia College. David, would you share a few words with us about your experiences with Jon?
Thank you. Jon Eller is Indiana University through and through. MA and PhD from IU, Chancellor's Professor of English, co-founder and director of the Center for Ray Bradbury Studies, and he never misses a home football game. Jon's scholarship on Ray Bradbury, especially the biography, will not be superseded for generations. The Center for Ray Bradbury Studies with its archives is a permanent resource to which scholars will come forever. These two achievements by themselves make Jon worthy of the Bicentennial Medal. While the two achievements I've mentioned fit the criteria well, I wish to briefly state additional aspects of Jon's work at IUPUI. In the criteria for the medal are two requirements I wish to highlight. One, broaden the reach of Indiana University, and two, seen as a model for future faculty. Jon frequently gives a public lecture on Ray Bradbury at the Indianapolis Central Library. At the lectures I attended, the room was full of enthusiastic Bradbury fans. They drank in what Jon presented. His encyclopedic knowledge and memory, along with great stories, provided a rich evening full of insights. The audience filled their opportunity with questions and remarks, upon which Jon easily and fully commented. The significance of these evenings is that Jon carried the Bradbury Center in Indiana University to the general public. He presented scholarship in a manner to which anyone could relate. Jon is the model not only of the intellectual, but of the public intellectual who elevates the thought and discourse of those outside the academy. This public interaction is a significant aspect of the university, which contributes to the well-being of the community and nation. Jon not only contributed to those of us in the academy, but also to those outside the academy. Thank you, Jon.
Thank you. And now allow me to introduce Jason Aukerman, Clinical Assistant Professor of English and Managing Director of the Center for Ray Bradbury Studies. Jason, we just heard from someone who is finishing up a second illustrious career and was influenced by Jon, and now we get to welcome you, a new, who I believe you just finished the most recent draft, or maybe the final draft of your doctoral dissertation. Welcome, and could you please share a few words with us?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Rob. And yes, I successfully defended the dissertation on October 30th. So final draft has been submitted to the graduate office, but this is a good day. I'm so happy that I get to say a few words about the good Dr. Jon Eller this morning. I remember the first time I met Dr. Eller. It was the spring 2014 semester, and I was taking a course in children's literature with Megan Musgrave. We had just finished reading Fahrenheit 451, and Jon came in as a guest lecturer to share some of his knowledge about Bradbury. He also brought a number of treasures from the Bradbury Center to show off, and I think everyone in the room fell in love with Jon a little bit on that day. It was fascinating. This couple years later, I began working very closely with Jon in the Bradbury Center. And over the years, Jon has become a dear friend and the greatest mentor I've ever had. I could say a lot about what Jon has meant to me and my family over the years, but he has given me strict instructions to not get too sappy. So I had to find a way around that. And I think I came up with a good solution. During my years working with Jon, I've worked alongside a number of people in the Bradbury Center: graduate student interns, volunteers, and part-time staff. And all of us have appreciated Jon's leadership. You can tell a lot about a person by talking to the people who have worked under them. I reached out to many of my current and past colleagues, and I told them what was going on today. And I asked them, if you could say a few brief words about Jon, what would you say? These are some of the responses I got. Jon is passionately curious, fascinating to listen to, encouraging. He makes you feel special. He has a kind and generous heart. He's sharp-witted, innovative. He's a brilliant strategist, dedicated, determined, and passionate. His brain is like an encyclopedia. He is a voracious reader and an enthusiastic learner with a constant drive to improve, and he leads by example. Dr. Eller never, ever ask an employee to do something that he is not willing to do himself, unless it involves technology. Dr. Eller is an awesome storyteller, and he is quick to apologize for his Eller digressions. I don't know why. Those digressions are why I love working with him. He has a seemingly boundless breadth of knowledge. He's brilliant, and he is genuinely warm, and he is a genuinely warm and generous person, not to mention a true genius. And he's humble. Jon is a protector. He looks after his people, and he always has their back. Dr. Eller's mind is like a steel trap. He knows so much, and he is a gifted teacher who knows how to inspire curiosity in his students, get them interested in the material, and then guide them to success. His deep knowledge of literature, pop culture, baseball, world history, geography, and you name it. His rich life experience and deep institutional knowledge makes him not only a treasure to Indiana University, but to everyone who has had the privilege of working with and learning from him. John, I may be a little sentimental. It's hard not to be when I think about the kind of human being you are and the many things that you've done for me over the years. But I'm not alone. You've touched many lives. And even though I know you don't like to have the spotlight, I'm glad that it's on you for a little while this morning. It's given many people who love and admire and appreciate you an opportunity to say thanks. This is an honor that's well-deserved. Congratulations.
Thank you, Jason. Now we'll hear from Ray Haberski, current director of the Institute for American Thought and professor of history and American Studies, who will say a few words about Jon and what he has done for the Center for Ray Bradbury Studies and the Institute for American Thought. Welcome, Ray.
Well, thanks, Rob. Well, Jon, from my vantage point, what makes this so bizarre is that it feels like a kind of retrospective on your career. This is my 6th year at IUPUI. I feel like, haven't we just begun, Jon? Building things together? And maybe that's the most extraordinary thing about my relationship with you, Jon, is that I came in, in the last maybe quarter of your career, and you've helped me change my career. You helped me change part of IUPUI. And I think for that, Jon, you have been one of the greatest allies I've ever had in academia. It's an extraordinary thing to be able to have the sort of vision you do of the institution, but also of the academic world, of the worlds that intersect with academia and IUPUI. And I am grateful for all the advice that you've given me, all the help, unpaid help you've given me, things that we never could have done if I just tried to do it alone. How many times we spent lunches over at Chancellor's working out details that went well beyond what we had to talk about in terms of the Bradbury Center, even the IAT. And I'm forever grateful for that. The fact that you helped build the American Studies PhD program, Jon, yet again, you have built another part of the foundation of this institution. And I guess, for that, we will, that'll become part of the history that maybe Jason writes in another few years. I have to say, reading Jason's dissertation, the best part of that was the part about the Bradbury Center. And reading about your past, the growth of the center, but also the integration, the relationship that you and Debbie have to the center and to the people of the center. It's a sort of magical undertaking that you've created and that you've allowed us to be part of. And for that, I am endlessly appreciative. I enjoy so much going down to the center and hanging out with you two that sometimes I have to, as you know, physically pull myself away from eating chocolate with you and listening to stories and chatting with you to actually go do work because I like it so much. So, Jon, thank you for being a mentor to Jason. Thank you for being a mentor, an advisor, an ally to me. Thank you for all the advice you've given me on the past of the IAT and the Center for American Studies, for all the help that you've given me thinking through what a PhD program is supposed to look like in the future. I don't see this as, a shift away from any of that, Jon. I will be continuing to draw you back in some way, even if it's by phone or Skype, or I have to drive down to Bloomington myself. But like Phil Goff, I have been sort of investing in reading great philosophers. And I found one quote that I thought I would leave on. It's from that great philosopher, Don Vito Corleone. We share a great love of The Godfather, Jon. So from Vito, friendship is everything. Friendship is more than talent. It is more than government. It is almost the equal of family. thank you, John, for being my friend.
Thank you, Ray. Now, let me introduce Tom Davis, former Dean of Liberal Arts and Professor of Religious Studies. Tom could not be with us today, but he has recorded a brief video which we would like to play for you now.
Hi, John. I am so glad to be able to offer you congratulations on your award. You have done so much for the school, and your work has really extended out beyond the school to make an impact, frankly, internationally. I remember when you were still on the 4th floor, all of your Bradbury collection kind of packed in tightly together, and I was so glad that we were able to see that material move to your current location on the 1st floor so that you could spread out and so that people could come in and just see all of the marvelous artifacts that you have pertaining to Ray Bradbury. You've curated the material, the collection, you've designed the space, you're cataloging the material, and of course you engage in constant critical analysis of Bradbury's work. I mean, you've done so much. One could ask, right, with all that going on, you are certainly staying busy, but at the end of the day, what is the goal? And I would like to frame what I see to be the goal anyway. I would like to frame that with a quote from one of our favorite authors, C.S. Lewis. As you know, he wrote An Experiment in Criticism in 1961, and there he says something that has really served as the touchstone for my life, personally and professionally. And Lewis says, "My own eyes are not enough for me. I will see through the eyes of others." He goes on to say, "In great literature, I become 1,000 men, and yet remain myself." And after talking a little bit about literature and the ways he experiences the world through that literature, he says, "Here, as in worship, in love, in moral action, in knowing, I transcend myself, and I am never more myself than when I do." Now, what's also particularly fun about this essay is that Lewis gives a shout out to science fiction. And of course, we're talking here about Ray Bradbury, and he says something I think that's really important. He says that in dealing with literature, we shouldn't think so much in terms of lowbrow or highbrow literature, but in terms of the lasting impact a work makes, and whether or not it changes a world view. And I'd have to say, based on my own experience, and I know on yours, that Bradbury's work has changed worldviews. You have been a sure guide to Bradbury's life and thought, and you have created an environment in which it is easier to see through Bradbury's eyes, to become more. You've made it easier to get into the mind of Bradbury and to understand it, and to share his vision and his view, the vision that can, in fact, change the world, so to speak. Think about his inspiration for countless astronauts and going to space. So I have to say, John, in your curation, your scholarship, your teaching, and in your colleagueship, in those great conversations you have with us, you help us to transcend ourselves, and we are the better for it. Thank you.
Wow. I think one last tribute to John has to be that all of our speakers really brought their A game today, knowing that just taking advantage of this opportunity and putting in the time, and what a beautiful set of remembrances and how beautifully written. And now, in honor of all that Dr. Jon Eller has done for the Center for Ray Bradbury Studies and the Institute for American Thought, the IU School of Liberal Arts, Indiana University, and beyond, I am honored to present the Indiana University Bicentennial Medal. The Bicentennial Medal, a special initiative of Indiana University's 200th anniversary, is awarded to organizations and individuals who, through their personal, professional, artistic, or philanthropic efforts, have broadened the reach of Indiana University around the state, the nation, and the world. Made of materials salvaged from bells that once rang out from the tower of the Francis Morgan Swain Student Building on the IU Bloomington campus, each Bicentennial Medal is a lasting piece of Indiana University history. Jon, I believe you should have the medal there with you. Typically, I would have presented this medal to you in person as I utter the following words. Since I'm not with you right now, maybe you and Debbie can help me out. Could you hold up the medal? Thank you, for all of us to see. By virtue of the authority vested in me by the trustees of Indiana University, I am pleased and privileged to present this Bicentennial Medal on behalf of IU President Michael McRobbie and IUPUI Chancellor Nasser Paydar to Dr. Jonathan Eller. Congratulations. Jon, hope you'll say a few words.
Thank you so much, Rob, and thank you for the miracle of being able to transfer this medal electronically through the ether so that it popped out of my laptop just a few seconds ago. We've heard things from my good friends who are also present and past leaders. There's family, there are a lot of people viewing that we wanted to have here to view. And actually the speakers have made it easy for me to really just condense anything I would have to say to its essence. I think that what I say is centered on how Indiana University provided a heart home for our far traveling lives. Debbie grew up in the military. I grew up in an academic family that moved all over the place. We all went to probably 8 different schools in our 12 years of school growing up. Our son, Chris, because of our military duty, went to at least 7, 8, or 9 schools himself. And in the military, we were transferred between 14 assignments around the world in those 20 years. We had no sense of home, what Bob Dylan might call, we had no direction home. If you remember that song from the early mid-'60s. And it resonated with me, it always did. I was appointed to the Air Force Academy in 1969, graduated in 1973. Immediately, Debbie and I were married and headed off to assignments where my first 2 commanders were active duty World War II serving veterans. So when I entered the Air Force, there were still a number of World War II veterans still serving and commanding. And I look back now and think with wonder how time marches on and how things have changed through the natural course of time. We served under 6 United States presidents, from Richard Nixon to Bill Clinton. And the duty in the various commands that we were in, stateside and overseas, led to the Academy saying, we'd like to bring you back to teach. What graduate school would you like to go to? And I was accepted at Indiana University, and we left Tokyo at the end of 1979 and came to Bloomington, Indiana. Can you imagine the change in perspective, the change in life that was? And to then have to drive on the other side of the road again after 3 years in Asia. But that was a blessing because Indiana University took us in and allowed us to form the basis for the education that I took on to the second half of my Air Force career and the 27 years since we've been at IUPUI. Many of my professors, because we were all still, when we came on active duty, still under the universal draft of 1940. And many of my professors had military service. Even some had been POWs during World War II. But I was led to a special doctoral minor, as Marianne and Richard Turner and David Pfeifer have alluded to, in textual studies, that kind of detective work that then allowed me really to resonate with Ray Bradbury and to come to the jobs here. It was a wonderful time in the summer of 1991 when my dissertation director, the late Don Cook, he and I were at an event at the Library of Congress in Washington. He said, you know, the First Edition needs a textual editor. When can you retire from the Air Force? And it was 2 more years. But that transition was made at the right time in 1993 through John Barlow, Dean, Richard Turner, all of the people who made all of that possible in those days for us. I should probably wrap it up more or less by saying that IU, both IU Bloomington and IUPUI especially, gave us that hard home we've been talking about. And Bradbury Center, the opportunity then from the past experiences to bring it to IU with deans like Tom Davis and Bob White and Bill Bloomquist, who made that possible for us to bring, along with Phil Goff, as he had mentioned earlier in his role. And we had that direction home. And this wonderful collection is there for a writer who is a myth maker. His whole life was myth, and we're still living his myths in the 21st century. We live in a world of constant change, but Ray Bradbury said that myth seen in mirrors, incapable of being touched, stays on. And I'm so grateful for the chance that IUPUI and especially the School of Liberal Arts gave us to bring Ray Bradbury, the myth maker, to live on and stay on at IUPUI. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Debbie, for the role you played in all this, and especially for your role as a super volunteer for the Center for Ray Bradbury Studies. I don't think I visited one time when you weren't there working on something. Would you like to please add a few words to us?
I have to say that it has been such an incredible joy. I felt like I lived and breathed with Ray Bradbury for, since 1989. And to bring everything to Indiana, he no longer lives in LA. There's a marker in LA, that's attributed to him. But his vitality, his spirit lives and breathes in our center, and how exciting that is. And we have had such a privilege of working with not only volunteers, Nancy Orem, you're here today, but also the wonderful interns, to Liz and Maddie for, helping us to make money. It's just been incredible, the work that we've been able to get done, because Ray Bradbury was a pack rat. No, he was a hoarder. I'm telling you, I was in that house. I know what I saw. And for us to be able to, unpack all of these letters and the files, and that our interns, Katie right now, and Jordan and Alicia, who are helping us, it's just been incredible to sit at a table and you all remember this who have worked with us there, and we're reading through these letters and you hear these comments like, oh, I can't believe this. And Ray knew everybody. The most special times were when we had some of our visiting students who were Arabic speaking. And so we pulled out all of the volumes of Ray's work that are published in Arabic, and they were stunned. Or when we had the representative from the PBS station in Moscow come and do interviews with us. And we took, 30, 40 of our books that are in Russian and laid those out. And he said, I know these. I've read all these. And Ray has been known everywhere. We've had visitors from everywhere. And I can't tell you what a joy that is. And Ray would love it. If he walked in there, he would love it. He would sit, he would hold court, he would start telling stories. And that is the excitement for us to do as John's partner in this. It's just been a joy and a pleasure. And thank you.
Thank you. And congratulations again, Jon, on receiving the Indiana University Bicentennial Medal. Thank you, guest presenters, for helping us to honor our special guest. And thanks to all of you for attending today's ceremony. On behalf of the faculty, staff, and students of the School of Liberal Arts, best wishes, be well, and goodbye for now.